I'm a Muslim.
Go get some from Terry.
Oh, are we starting this thing?
Yeah, we are starting.
Oh, sick.
I figure it's also good to like get a more natural start to it, but we're also still gonna do the start.
This is pretty natural.
Well, we're gonna have that's the intro music's gonna go over all this.
Hello, I'm Mason Banks,
And I'm Dylan Dill Pickle Hoban.
and this is Opening the Vault.
This is episode 4.
Well, this is installment 4.
Installment 4, episode 3, correct. And we have a very special guest today.
Her
we
name
have-
is Jayani Davis-Crawford, great director of a student-produced show on our STSU campus through the Skull and Dagger Dramatic Society. And hi, Jayani.
Hi, you guys. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
No, thank you for being there. I was honestly really like, when Dylan was like, hey, like, we want to be on your podcast. I was like, what? I have like, respect.
Mason, I'd just do anything for you.
Oh.
Okay, he's my child.
So, Mason, I've been busy on the show, so you have some questions.
Yes, I
this
have
is
a
good,
question.
because I don't have any.
Okay, so without giving away too much, can you guys, both of you, I guess, specifically we'll start with Jayani, I guess. What is the show about?
Okay, I have like a preset, like this is exactly how much I'm willing to give away about this show.
Okay.
It is about two men who are cell neighbors, and they're both on death row.
Okay.
The lead, John Brennan, played by Dylan,
Hey.
writes obituaries for everyone that is executed on death row. So he goes around and finds all the pleasant information about them and writes really kind and flattering obituaries so that like the last thing that we hear about these people is really positive. So he gets a new cell neighbor named Bobby. And Bobby's this really sweet guy. He's like, hi, I'm Bobby. Will you be my friend? I really want to be nice to you. I really like animal impressions. Also, I'm a neo-Nazi. And so the dilemma that we are presented with is how does John continue to write these obituaries about Bobby, this awful person who hates and murders even though he does it with a smile on his face and he has this sweetness to him. And so the plays, it's just a lot of contradictions, a lot of questions posed to you, and it's a real thinker.
I like it. It sounds deliciously evil, as I would say.
There's a lot more to it in terms of the dilemmas and the contradictions and the things that you think about, but that's all I'm going to give you.
So would you put it in the category of a comedy or drama?
I would call it, I hate this word because I feel like it's a cop-out, but it's a dramedy.
It's
I'd
dramedy?
agree.
Yeah, it's really deep stuff delivered in a way that you're like, oh my god. At least I like to hope that's how I directed it.
No, I have all the faith in you. I have all the faith in you. You're very specific in all the classes and the exercises we have done together in classes previous.
Thank you.
She's a great director.
Dylan, stop.
Oh, I'm supposed to interview you, not be biased, but she's a good director.
So, what made you want to put this on? Like, was it something specific in, like, our social climate, or is it something that you have just been interested in for a while now? Or?
It's kind of interesting because just me as a person, I don't think I would have been like, this is how I'm going to start directing. That being said, I adore this show. I got to see it actually maybe like a year and a half before this whole process started. And I had purchased the script for my boyfriend for his birthday, and it arrived super late. I dropped my phone. And the person who was heading Skull and Dagger at the time was like, would you like to direct this? And I was like, absolutely. Like, why wouldn't I? It's such a great play. It was written a while ago, but it's just more relevant as time goes by, which is both impressive from a writing perspective, but depressing from a socio-political climate perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of like handed to me, to be completely honest, and I didn't even know if I'd like directing that much, but I absolutely adore it. I haven't been this excited since I discovered theater, so I've been having a really great time, and I'm really glad to do this.
Nice.
This show's my baby.
I love that. I can hear a little.
That's what you get when you come to the show. What has you mentioned it's become more relevant? What's been the most difficult process with directing such a heavy topical show in this political, social world we live in now?
Honestly, like in the simplest terms, the director's note, but just the idea of Bobby. Because when I first saw this show, it was like, wow, like, what a conundrum. Bobby is such a conundrum. What do we do with him? Like, do we love him? Do we hate him? Like, how am I supposed to feel? And now I'm at a point in my life politically where I'm like, no, you still hate him. And it's, for me, what it's become is that Bobby's character has become a lot more terrifying. Because it's like, that's the thing about certain people in this world, and that's the reason we have this whole, like, there are literal Nazis out there, and people are like, well, that's not a fair word to call them. Like, I mean, both sides is because they're able to see the humanity in these people who want to do horrible, horrible things to other human beings for no other reason than how they look or where they were born. And so it's about, the play has gone from posing the conundrum to showing people that there's no real conundrum, to showing people that maybe you will feel this about Bobby and you'll realize his humanity, and then you have to face the fact that everyone on this planet is human. That is just a fact of science. That's just a fact of life.
Yeah.
You have to move past that and realize that there are some humans who you cannot allow yourself to feel this way about. And if you do feel this way, you have to move past it to, like, progress as a society. We have to be able to understand that we all have a humanity, and that is sometimes the problem.
So, like, we need to be willing to almost condemn certain parts of our society, I guess, as being detrimental and or just taking away.
Mean, the Nazis.
They're not,
yeah. We have to realize, like, there was that video after the South Carolina Tiki Torches rally of that dude who knew that there was, like, a warrant out for his arrest, and he posted a video of himself crying because he was so afraid of being arrested. And people were like, oh man, oh no, poor guy. But no,
This is one of the Tiki Torches guys.
This is one of the Tiki Torches guys.
Oh, one of the Nazis.
Yes.
One of the Nazis.
Okay.
And that's just propaganda, because all that does is make someone who would have, if they just saw a picture of him with, like, a tiki torch and he has an angry face and he's all red and the caption is like, this guy said kill all the da-da-da, they'd be like, oh, what a terrible guy. But then you see him crying and you're like, oh no, he's just human. Because people like to pretend that the bad people are monsters.
That brings up very interesting points. I feel like a lot of times in stories and a lot of things we're exposed to, until probably a couple of years ago, we always thought of evil as this kind of archetypal stereotype. And I've seen and I've heard comedians talk about actually how racism isn't like the stereotypical, I'm gonna do this. It's usually very quiet, very kind of like, oh, they're doing this, and they're not broadcasting it. It's not all that they are, which kind of, I feel like, ties into the point that we're making.
Yeah, it's this idea that like when Dylan Roof was sentenced to death, everyone rejoiced, or not everyone, but a lot of people rejoiced, and we were like, we take care of racism, America does it, we're post-racial. But he is, don't get me wrong, a terrible person. I'm not really a pro-death penalty person. I think systemically it is too flawed, and I think there's too many problems with it. But Dylan Roof was a horrible person. There are other horrible people out there who just don't do what he does. And so he is used kind of as a scapegoat for racial tension. We have, up until recently, where there's so much more going on, but like, when someone does something like that, up until the entire dialogue is muddled now. It's muddled now. It's a totally different dialogue now. But for a while, and when I started the show, it was just like, someone does something above this level of heinous, we put them away, we do the thing, we make it publicly known. Anything below that, oh, well, that's not what that's about. Oh, I'm pretty sure they didn't mean it like that. Oh, I'm sure you're just making things up. Oh, you just want to be the victim.
So you feel Coyote on a Fence kind of explores that?
It explores that idea of, like, if you feel something for this person, what does that change, and should that change?
Okay.
it blurs the line a little bit of the above or below that. Like, oh, he's just a monster. You can't see Coyote on a fence and see Bobby as a monster. Even I can't.
And we can't get into that because that would give spoilers away, but the show also brings up kind of the origins of racism in a way, doesn't it?
It talks a lot about it being taught, because it is taught. And I will say that mental health is something that plays in a lot, and that was something that I really struggled with clarifying.
Mental health plays in with...
In terms of Bobby, the racist character, because I don't think this is too big of a spoiler, but John's perspective is that Bobby's racism is muddled by his mental health. I've seen like the little Facebook videos that do the little social justice like education for like 2 minutes or whatever. There was one talking about racism being a mental health issue, and it said that like when you think about it, like the way racists react to seeing like people of color and stuff, it's like they're being triggered. And I thought that was disgustingly offensive to say that like, oh, we're just triggers because we're brown and these people are just sick. Like that's not how that works. And so I think it's another instance of people trying to muddle something to make themselves more comfortable. If you can say that Bobby's just sick, then you don't have to decide whether or not you want to crucify him, because then you're being ableist. But I think that Bobby can be sick and be taught to be racist. And I think those things can exist in the same world.
Sure.
Because people are super complex. Like, none of us in this room are just one note. Like, there's so many things going on and so many things that, according to some kind of text, like storybook narrative, couldn't exist together, but they do. And I think that's another really interesting thing about Bobby as a character. All the characters are super interesting, but Bobby's kind of the conduit for what's interesting about the other characters, I'd say.
This might be a little out of scope of the show, but in your opinion, is there any way that we can impact, I mean, obviously with art and shows like this, we can send a message and just start a conversation and raise these topics, but how as a society can we progress to the point where we can all just be people?
That's tough, because it's something I think about, because there's that idea of like, well, if we go this way, we're just going to swing to the other side of things, which I think is kind of ridiculous. But I think the point that kind of lies buried under that ridiculous statement is that we will never be able to exist in a vacuum. Everything that's happened up until this point in the history of the world, it cannot be undone. And I feel like a lot of people feel like progression means progressing to a point where those things don't matter anymore. And I think that's a huge problem, is those things will always matter, but it's about how we react to their importance that I think will make us all people. I think that we need people in power to understand that they can be in power in one way and then lose power in another, because that's always a huge thing, is that people are like, well, how can I have white privilege if I'm poor? And that's a huge conversation. That's a huge thing that people need to understand, is that there's a I just learned this recently, but there's this idea of up and down privilege. And so if you are, say, like, I'll use myself, right? I am a woman, I am black, but I am also straight, I'm also cisgender. And so I have my downs and I have my ups.
Sure.
And it comes back to this idea of complexity. There is so much intersectionality, even with like straight, cisgender, like white men. Like, you could be all those things, you could be like middle class, but like if your parents are divorced or something, I'm not necessarily saying that that's a like socio-political downfall, but it's something that affects how you're able to go through the world. I'm not like a, two-parent household is the only way to raise a child person, but like you can still have trauma. You could possibly have a mental health issue. Maybe you're not totally able-bodied, but because of these other things you have going on, you still have these privileges, and they just interact in different ways. So I think when we get to a point where people are able to analyze their positions beyond that knee-jerk, like, hey, that's not fair, because we all have that when we go through something. Like, I've read articles about like my life, how I go through life as a straight person, and my first instinct is like, well, that's not what I mean, and then I'm like, well, it doesn't matter what I mean. And I think that's another thing that we have to dismantle, is this idea of activism of intent. People always responding to things they've done with, I didn't mean to do that. Because if I step on your toe and you're like, my toe is broken, and I say, I didn't mean to step on your toe and break it, so your toe is still broken.
Sure.
Okay.
And so I feel like it's dismantling some egos and allowing some to be built up. It's super complicated.
It is.
Like,
it is.
Because like my straight answer is like, we have to dismantle white supremacy, which is built into everything.
Sure.
We have to dismantle like cis heteropatriarchy, which is built into everything. It's a total stripping down of everything we believe to be true, and that's terrifying for a lot of people.
And that doesn't happen overnight either.
It doesn't happen overnight. I doubt that any of us will be alive to see it, but we'll see change. You know what I mean? And that's another part of it, is allowing yourself to fight for something that you'll never see come to fruition.
I want to build something that's going to outlive me.
Exactly.
To quote
Gotta
Mr.
handle
Lin-Manuel Miranda. So yeah, it's great that we have plays like this and art and acting and directing to express these big, hard to grasp concepts and really have a good outlet to talk about them.
Yeah, hit me with the next one.
Any more?
Well, I do have one last one. It's pretty simple. It's like, what challenges did you face, or like are you facing, besides navigating these racial and socio-political issues when you were putting on Kylie, or when you were building the show?
I mean, just with this process, since like the beginning of our like read through and stuff, I guess it's a lot of things. It's organization. It's not been a huge thing, but just the idea of like grasping it, because it wasn't like something that I had to wrangle into submission for organization. I have my own system. I have like a notebook for every project I work on.
Yeah.
But it was more about that idea of like, I have to grab that. I have to grab the reins of organization, and they weren't hard to navigate, but I just had to do that. And like that, like mental shift, and talking to friends as like colleagues or subordinates. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
like I have to talk to my actors, and I'm like, okay, we have to do this now. And sometimes I like have to like wrangle them, and I have to use like a big girl tone. And it's
with me especially sometimes.
Oh yeah. And it's kind of nerve-wracking just in general you have to walk around like you know what you're doing all of the time. Yeah, even when you say I have no idea, you have to be like, I have no idea, instead of like, I don't know. Yeah. And it's just this, like I was speaking to this woman I've worked with the San Diego Actors Theater. I hope I said the correct thing. And she's a director with this company, and I was working box office for her just this last weekend, and she was asking me about the show, and I went, well, and I was like, I can't do that in the business. Like, you can't use that like equivocal tone, because everyone's making art, everyone's doing art. If you want people to see your art, you have to say it like it needs to be seen. So I had to go, well, yeah, it's great. It's going really well. And I don't trust my self-assessment in this situation as much as I usually do.
Okay.
Like in Adrian's movement course or in clowning,
Yes,
where I'm creating everything. I create the text, quote unquote, if there is text or not. I create everything that happens, or I collaborate on it. Every single minutia of what gets presented, I've been able to analyze. In this situation, I am given text and actors and designers and a space, and we have to make all those things make sense. And that's just a little more removed. And so it's harder to be aware of what I'm doing, because I spend like 3 hours staring at the same 4 people, like making notes, and it just doesn't feel the same. And so I have to fake it, basically. I just have to walk around with this confidence about the show that I cannot myself assess, that my actors can't really assess because they're there. My stage manager's been there too long. My TD's been there too long. We've all been there too long to really know how it is.
Yeah.
But I have to go out and tell people, like, oh yeah, it's going great. It's fantastic. Everything's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. Not to say that things aren't going the way I want, but it's just this scary idea of, like, just, like, the amount of competence you have to have.
Yeah.
Even outside of rehearsals.
Yeah, I've dealt with something similar. I've only directed one thing so far, but when I was directing that, I was a little bit behind the scheduling for stuff, and I never felt like I had a full grasp on it. But I had to kind of like make up these exercises for my actors to do, because I could. There's little things that you know that need to be done, but you're like, how do I express this in like a way like, oh yes, you see what you want to do here. It's, you know, express the tiger animal, and then use that for your character.
It's trying to get an actor, because it's not that our actors can't do it, it's just like you see this like thing in your head and you're like, how do I word that? Like I don't have the depth of like language to express that. And
you're a very visual director.
I am. I do a lot of things with my hands. And it's
you
so
make
hard.
imagery, and you say it's like this. It's like you're a child and you're talking to your mother or something.
Yeah,
you make a lot of analogies.
I like that because I think visual and like it's very visceral, and if you can kind of, I don't know, these images are pretty universal in their effect, and so if you can find that very specific one that you feel like keys into the image that you're seeing in your head as a director,
yeah,
I feel like
Dylan, talk like you're a cherry blossom, not the tree, just the blossom.
That's a little out there, but
yeah, but like that's how it feels sometimes. I feel like directing, like summed up in a simple analogy, is like your hand can hold like 13 marbles, and you have to pick up 14. And you can't leave until you pick up 14 marbles. And so you just keep stretching your hand until it cramps and like trying to fit that 14th marble in your hand. That's how I feel all the time.
Like I said, very, very image-based, very...
yeah.
But to be fair, you're doing a great job. And the show is going to be great. And I don't know if we've plugged it yet. But
I have all the confidence in it. So it is officially called, to put it all out there, it's called Coyote on a Fence. And it's playing this weekend, this Friday, Saturday at 7 p.m. in this SDSU Experimental Theater.
Yep.
And then on Sunday at 2 p.m.
In the same place.
The
yeah.
17th through the 14th.
And it is
the 17th through the 14th?
It is free.
17th through the 19th of 2017 of November.
It is free with a suggested donation of $5 if you'd like to contribute to Skull and Dagger Dramatic Society, which would be great.
I'm sure most of the people listening would.
Yeah.
Because
we need money.
Well, you need money, and it's. I love that we can put on full-length productions like this. A lot of times, the student-run productions, like, you do a play festival or this or that.
Or a abridged version.
A abridged version doesn't quite feel like it's fully there, but like this really, it allows us to stretch in the ways that we need to as actors, and to get put on directing hats, producer, designer.
I think this is a bigger budget-wise production than Skull and Dagger's last one too.
Yeah, definitely. I was yes, I was a part of that one. So
you were in Lobby Hero.
I can definitely say that it was, because pretty much like his budget was the director being like, oh, I'm gonna go buy this shirt for you. My first set design, I looked at it and I was like, oh no, this looks like Lobby Hero, but in prison. We need to add more stuff, and that's how the budget got so big, because I was like, we can't look like the last show. Do you know enough? Well, I'm sure you know enough about the design, but I was wondering, did the acting or did any of the story, how did that influence any of the scenic choices you guys made?
I actually designed the set.
Oh,
so she does.
Nice.
So I know a lot about that,
I'm talking
actually.
to the right person.
Well, it was interesting because, as disgusting as this is, my first instinct was, can we make it look like the one I saw?
Mm-hmm.
Just because
that's natural.
It was so functional and flawless and great. But first of all, money. Second of all, it was not a black box 3/4 thrust theater, which we're not doing ours in 3/4 thrust. We're staging at proscenium in the experimental. But it was just, honestly, it was based off the really basic technical stuff, like sight lines, first of all, And second of all, sightlines. Like, it was just, how can I have everyone be seen, and how can everyone make sure to make it to their places? And then after that, it was okay, based off of those things, how cool can it look?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say it's a good looking set. I wouldn't say it's mind-blowingly cool, but it does have, the show itself is kind of written to have some very mildly dreamlike elements. Like, very mildly
Yes.
dreamlike. But there's this fun little element of, like, the story happening in two different spots simultaneously. There's this
Characters talking to each other from different parts of the stage.
There's a flashback element, which I won't really talk about because it kind of
borders on
you'll
spoilers.
see.
You'll see when you see it. You'll see.
But
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
like, there was the fun part of, like, figuring out where Shauna, the prison guard, like, where she was gonna go, and that was, I think I played with that the most, because a lot of her points are just her speaking alone to an unseen character. And so I moved her around 2 or 3 times. The only thing that stayed was the cell. I knew where the cell was going from the moment I knew we were doing it in experimental. And then the interview scenes, those moved around a little bit. And it was really just like, what was I allowed to do? And then I did that.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the set. Allie's been our technical director. She's been working really hard. She's been super valuable to me.
Allie This.
Yeah,
correct.
Allie This. And then Kristen and Andrew, this faculty we have in the shop, they've been super, super helpful.
Yeah.
And without them, we couldn't have done this. Without them, it would be taped. It would be taped or chalked or something.
That's pretty great, actually.
Yeah, there are going to be cell bars. Like, that's a big deal to me because this is a student production.
Yeah.
And our lighting person is Chloe Clark, who did Anonymous Lights.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They
Chloe's
are
great.
beautiful.
The lights look really
I
good.
almost cried. Whew.
Well, that is pretty much almost everything I have. I feel like we could talk for a long time, but I also want to dig into your actors and break apart their minds.
Yeah.
See what it's like in
Break their
prison.
souls.
Get ready to be broke, Dylan.
The show's already broke me many times. Don't even
Oh
worry
my
about
gosh.
it.
I'll let you talk about that in your next interview.
I will. You'll have to listen later to see what I reveal about working under you. Yeah, so let's take a quick break. Bring the actors in here. Jayani, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. This
for,
is really fun. It's my first podcast.
Yeah.
And we're not shutting the vault. We're just closing the deposit box, and we're gonna open a new one.
So get your pen out, sign your checks, and we'll be right back.